My stepkids made it clear they didn't love me and only tolerated me for the lifestyle, so I took the lifestyle away, and tolerance vanished right after. I'd married their father when they were 14 and 17, siblings. Both had made it abundantly clear from day one that I was an inconvenience they'd endure as long as the private school tuition kept flowing and the vacation houses stayed accessible. Their father, my husband, was worth about $8 million when we met. I had $340 in my checking account and drove a Honda with 190,000 miles on it. For 3 years, I played the role perfectly. I cooked meals they didn't eat. I asked about their days and got one-word answers. I drove them to their friends' houses in neighborhoods I couldn't afford to visit otherwise. When they posted family photos on social media, I was cropped out. When they introduced me to people, I was Dad's wife, never by name. Their mother had died when they were young, cancer. My husband had mourned for 6 years before we met at a conference where I was serving coffee and he was giving a keynote speech. He tipped me $100 and asked for my number. 6 months later, we were married. His kids made sure I understood I could never replace her. I didn't try to. I just existed in their orbit, funding their college applications with my husband's money. Both kids got into top schools, Yale and Princeton. My husband threw a party at our house that cost more than I used to make in a year. The kids thanked everyone except me. When someone asked how they managed such impressive applications, they credited their father's support and their late mother's genes. That night, I found receipts my husband had left on his desk. He'd been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer 6 months ago. He hadn't told me. He'd told the kids, though. I found their group chat open on his laptop, discussing how to protect their inheritance from me. They'd consulted lawyers about prenups and estate planning. They'd calculated exactly how long they needed to tolerate me before Dad's money was safely theirs. My husband died 4 months later. The funeral was tasteful, expensive. The kids cried beautifully for the cameras. At the reception, they announced they'd be taking gap years to travel Europe. They'd already booked first-class tickets to Paris using the joint credit card. The reading of the will happened the next week. My husband had left everything to me, every single dollar. The house, the investments, the vacation properties. He'd changed it 2 months before he died, after overhearing the kids discussing their plans to contest any inheritance I might receive. The lawyer handed me the documents while they sat frozen. "This can't be legal," the older one said. "It's completely legal," the lawyer replied. They turned to me with faces I'd never seen before. Desperate. Calculating. Suddenly, I was family. Suddenly, I was mom. Suddenly, they had so many memories of our time together, of how much I meant to them, of how their father would want us to stay close. I sold the vacation houses first. Then I downsized from the mansion to a modest 2-bedroom condo. I canceled their credit cards and told them their college funds would cover tuition only, nothing else. No apartments, no cars, no spending money. They'd have to work like I had. They threatened to sue. Their lawyers reviewed everything and found nothing. My husband had been clear, deliberate, and completely sound of mind. 6 months passed. The kids stopped calling, then stopped answering when I called. I saw their social media posts about how hard life was, how unfair, how they'd been abandoned by everyone. I was tagged in exactly 0 of them. That was 3 years ago. I moved on with my life, got a job I actually enjoyed at a nonprofit that helped families navigate medical debt. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd gone from serving coffee to helping people drowning in the kind of bills that would have destroyed me before I married into money. Made friends who knew me as just me, not as someone's wife or stepmother. I dated occasionally. Nothing serious. A few dinners here and there with men who seemed nice enough but never quite right. I was content. The money sat in accounts I barely touched, except for the nonprofit donations I made monthly. I lived off what I earned and let the rest grow. My condo was small, but it was mine. I decorated it the way I wanted. No expensive art chosen by interior designers, just things I liked. Photographs from trips I'd taken alone. Books I'd actually read. Plants I kept alive through trial and error. It felt honest in a way the mansion never had. I started volunteering at a community center on weekends, teaching financial literacy to people who'd never learned how to budget or save. People like I'd been before the $100 tip that changed everything. It felt good to use what I'd learned, to help people avoid the desperation I'd once felt staring at overdraft notices. My coworkers became my family. We'd grab drinks after work, celebrate birthdays with potluck dinners. They knew about my past in vague terms. Rich husband died. Stepkids hated me, left me money. None of them treated me differently for it. To them, I was just the woman who brought homemade cookies to staff meetings and stayed late to help clients who showed up past closing time. I was genuinely happy. For the first time in years, maybe for the first time in my entire life, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be, doing work that mattered, surrounded by people who valued me for who I was rather than what I could provide. Then one morning, 3 years and 2 months after the will reading, my stepdaughter showed up at my door. No warning, no call ahead. Just appeared on my doorstep at 7 in the morning with 2 suitcases and eyes that had been crying for what looked like days. I almost didn't recognize her at first. She'd lost weight. Her hair was unwashed. She wore sweatpants and an old t-shirt instead of the designer clothes I remembered. She looked like she'd been sleeping in her car. "I need help," she said. I stood there holding my coffee mug, wearing my pajamas because it was Saturday and I'd been planning to spend the day reading and doing laundry. Part of me wanted to close the door, to tell her she'd made her choice 3 years ago and now had to live with it. But there was something in her face that stopped me. She looked genuinely broken, not manipulative broken. Actually broken. I let her in. She sat on my couch and started crying before I could even ask what was wrong. Deep, shaking sobs that seemed to come from somewhere fundamental. I made her tea she didn't drink and waited for her to calm down enough to talk. When she finally spoke, the story came out in fragments. Her brother had gotten involved with the wrong people at Princeton, started gambling during his freshman year. Just poker games at first. Small stakes, then bigger games. Higher stakes. He'd convinced himself he was good at it, that he could make money, that he could turn his tuition allowance into something more. By sophomore year, he was in deep, borrowing money from other students to cover losses, borrowing money from people who weren't students, the kind of people who don't care about excuses or payment plans, who charge interest rates that make credit card companies look charitable. He'd borrowed money from her to cover it. She'd given him everything she'd saved from her work-study job, everything she'd managed to scrape together. Then he'd asked for more. She'd taken out private student loans, given him that money too, told herself she was helping, that he'd pay her back once he got control of the situation. Then 5 months ago, he'd disappeared, stopped answering calls, stopped showing up to classes. His roommate said he'd packed a bag one night and left without explanation. She'd filed a missing persons report, but Princeton was treating it as a voluntary disappearance. He was an adult. He had the right to leave if he wanted to. She'd dropped out of Yale to look for him, spent months following leads that went nowhere, tracking down people who'd known him, visiting places she thought he might have gone. She'd burned through what little money she had left, lost her apartment, been sleeping in her car for the past 6 weeks. The people he owes money to found me instead, she said. They came to where I was working, a coffee shop not unlike the one you used to work at. They told me my brother had given them my name, said I was good for the debt if he wasn't. They gave me 2 weeks to come up with $180,000 or they'd consider the debt transferred to me. She looked up at me with eyes that held real terror. That was 10 days ago, she said. I have 4 days left. I've tried everything, called everyone I could think of. Nobody has that kind of money, or nobody who has it will give it to me. And I realized the only person I know who could help is the person I treated the worst. I sat there processing. This girl who'd hated me, who'd cropped me out of photos, who'd calculated exactly how long to tolerate me, who'd celebrated when her father died because she thought it meant freedom from me. She was sitting on my couch asking for help with money she'd once considered rightfully hers. Why come to me? I asked, even though I knew the answer. Because you're the only person I know who has that kind of money, she said. And because I was wrong about you. We were wrong about you. Dad tried to tell us, but we wouldn't listen. What do you mean? I asked. She reached into her bag with shaking hands, pulled out a letter, worn, like it had been read hundreds of times, tear-stained. My husband's handwriting. He left this for me, she said, to be opened if something happened and I needed to understand. I opened it last month when I realized how bad things had gotten, when I understood I might actually die because of my brother's mistakes. I took the letter. My hands were steadier than hers, but not by much. Read it slowly, taking in every word. My dear daughter, it began. If you're reading this, then something has gone terribly wrong, and you've finally realized that the person I asked you to hate might be the only person willing to save you. I need to explain something I should have explained while I was alive. Your mother and I raised you with privilege, with the understanding that money would always be there, that you deserved things simply because you existed. I saw what it was doing to you, saw you becoming people who measured worth in dollars and relationships in transactions. When I married her, I knew exactly what I was doing. I wasn't looking for a companion, I was looking for a teacher, someone who understood what it meant to work for every dollar, someone who wouldn't be impressed by wealth because she'd never had it, someone who would show you through her actions what real character looked like. I asked her to be patient with you, to endure your cruelty, to let you treat her terribly while I poisoned you against her. I told you she was a gold digger, that she was only interested in money, that she'd abandon you the moment I died. I did this deliberately, because I needed you to see what happened when someone stayed despite having every reason to leave. I left her everything knowing exactly what you'd do. You'd reveal yourselves. You'd show her and yourselves who you'd become. And then life would teach you the lessons I failed to teach you myself. If you're reading this, those lessons have been learned the hard way. You're desperate, scared, broken. And you've realized that the only person who might help you is the person you spent 3 years destroying. She doesn't owe you anything. Understand that. She has every right to close the door in your face. But I'm betting she won't. Because she's exactly who I thought she was. Someone who helps even when helping hurts. Someone who shows up even when showing up is hard. Don't mistake her kindness for weakness. Don't think that if she helps you, it means what you did was okay. It wasn't okay. You were cruel to someone who only wanted to care for you. You measured her worth in dollars and found her lacking because you didn't understand that worth isn't measured that way. If she helps you, spend the rest of your life becoming someone who deserved that help. Become someone who measures people by their character instead of their bank accounts. Become someone who understands that the most valuable things in life are the ones you can't buy. I love you. I always have. But love without lessons is just indulgence. And I indulged you far too long. She won't. That's why I chose her. That's why I married her. That's why I left her everything. She's your last chance to become decent human beings. Don't waste it. I set the letter down, looked at this girl who'd made 3 years of my life miserable, who was now sitting on my couch crying because her father had orchestrated her downfall from beyond the grave to teach her a lesson. I'm not giving you $180,000, I said. Her face crumpled, the last bit of hope draining away. Then I don't know what to do. she whispered. They're going to hurt me, maybe kill me, and I can't find my brother to warn him that I couldn't pay. That whatever hole he's hiding in, they'll find him eventually. That we're both going to pay for his stupidity and my enabling. I'm not giving you the money, I repeated carefully, but I'll pay off the debt directly, to the people he owes. Not to you. Never to you. And I'll hire someone to find your brother. Someone professional. Someone who knows how to track people who don't want to be found. And then you're both going to come live here until you figure out how to be actual human beings, instead of entitled children who think the world owes them something. She stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. Why would you do that? She asked. After everything we did to you? After 3 years of treating you like garbage? After celebrating when you lost access to Dad's money? Why would you help us? I thought about that question. Really thought about it. About 3 years of being treated like nothing. About my husband's letter explaining a plan I'd never understood I was part of. About this broken girl sitting in my kitchen, finally understanding what her father had been trying to teach her. Because your dad asked me to, I said. He knew you'd screw up eventually. He knew you'd need someone who wouldn't give up on you even when you'd given up on yourselves. He married me because I was stubborn enough to still care even after you'd given me every reason not to. And because I'm not the kind of person who lets someone get hurt when I can prevent it. Even someone who treated me the way you did. It took me 3 days to sort out the debt situation. The people her brother owed money to weren't as scary as they'd seemed. Just college kids who'd gotten involved in something bigger than they understood. Running games for someone else. Making threats they probably wouldn't have followed through on. I paid them directly. Made them sign documents saying the debt was settled. Made sure they understood that if they came near either of my stepkids again, I had lawyers who'd make their lives very complicated. Finding my stepson took longer. I hired a private investigator who specialized in finding people who didn't want to be found. Cost me $15,000, but he was worth every penny. Tracked my stepson to a motel in Atlantic City 3 weeks later. He'd been hiding there, too ashamed to ask for help, trying to gamble his way out of debt and only making it worse. When the investigator sent me the address, I drove down myself, showed up at his motel room door at 6 in the morning, knocked until he answered. He opened the door looking like he'd aged 10 years in the 3 since I'd last seen him, thinner, hollow-eyed, wearing the same clothes he'd probably been wearing for days. He tried to close the door when he saw me. I put my foot in the way. Your sister is safe, I said. The debt is paid, and you're coming home with me. He started crying right there in the doorway. This boy who'd once looked at me with such contempt, who'd calculated exactly how long he needed to tolerate me before his father died. He was crying like a child who'd finally found his parent after being lost. I brought them both back to my condo, made them sleep in my bedroom while I took the couch, fed them actual food because they'd both been living on whatever was cheapest, watched them slowly remember what it felt like to be safe. Then the hard part started. I made them get jobs, not careers. Not positions that use their incomplete Ivy League educations. Jobs. My stepdaughter started working at the same coffee shop where the debt collectors had found her, making minimum wage plus tips, coming home exhausted with feet that hurt and the smell of espresso in her hair. My stepson got hired at a warehouse, loading trucks, physical labor that left him so tired he could barely move some nights. They hated it at first, complained constantly. Why did they have to work these terrible jobs when I had millions sitting in accounts? Why couldn't I just give them money to get back on their feet? Why was I being so cruel? I didn't argue with them, just kept making them go to work, kept making them pay for their own groceries with money they'd earned, kept making them understand what it felt like to be too tired to cook and too broke to order delivery. I also made them go to therapy. Found them a counselor who specialized in entitled young adults learning to function in the real world. Someone who wouldn't coddle them or make excuses for their behavior. Someone who'd make them face what they'd become and who they needed to be. My stepdaughter fought it hard at first, spent entire sessions sitting in silence or giving one-word answers. The therapist told me privately that she'd never seen someone so resistant to self-examination. But slowly, something shifted. She started talking, started crying, started admitting that she'd been a terrible person, that she'd treated me like garbage because it was easier than admitting her father had been right about her. My stepson took even longer. He was buried under so much shame about the gambling and the debt, and almost getting his sister killed that he couldn't see past it. Spent months barely speaking, going to work, coming home, sleeping, existing but not really living. His therapist said he was depressed. Recommended medication. He refused at first. Said he deserved to feel this way. That suffering was his punishment. I sat him down one night after he'd been with me for about 4 months. He was sitting on the couch staring at nothing like he did most evenings. Your father didn't leave me money to punish you, I said. He left me money to save you, but I can't save you if you won't let me. You made mistakes. Big ones. Ones that could have gotten people killed. But you're not a bad person. You're just someone who made bad choices and now has to live with the consequences while learning to make better ones. He looked at me with eyes that held so much pain. How can you stand to look at me? He asked. After what I did? After how I treated you? After I almost got my sister killed? I thought about that. About how complicated the answer was. Because holding grudges is exhausting, I said. Because your father asked me to be patient. Because I believe people can change if they're willing to do the work. And because you're sitting here hating yourself, which means you understand what you did wrong. That's the first step. He started taking the medication after that. Started engaging in therapy. Started slowly climbing out of the hole he dug himself into. 6 months after they moved in, things started to feel almost normal. They both still worked their minimum wage jobs. Both still went to therapy twice a week. But they also started doing things without being asked. My stepdaughter would cook dinner sometimes. Simple things like pasta or stir-fry, but she'd cook. My stepson started doing the grocery shopping, making lists, comparing prices, learning the skill of stretching a dollar. They started asking about my day, really asking, listening to my stories about clients at the nonprofit, about the family who'd just gotten their medical debt forgiven, about the single mother who'd learned to budget and saved enough for a security deposit on a better apartment. They listened like my work mattered, like I mattered. One night, my stepdaughter was washing dishes after dinner. I was drying. My stepson was putting leftovers away. We were working in comfortable silence. Then she spoke. "I saw my friend from Yale today," she said. Or former friend, I guess. She was in town visiting family, saw me in my coffee shop uniform, and pretended not to recognize me at first. Then when she realized it was really me, she asked what I was doing working there. Like it was so beneath me. Like serving coffee was something to be ashamed of. "What did you tell her?" I asked. "I told her I was learning what real work felt like," she said, "and that I should have learned it a long time ago." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "I kept thinking about you. About how you worked at that coffee shop when Dad met you. How you probably had people look down on you all the time. How you kept working anyway. Kept showing up. Kept doing what you needed to do. I never respected that. I thought it made you less than us. But it actually made you more. I didn't know what to say to that. So I just kept drying dishes. I'm sorry," she said quietly, "for everything. For how we treated you. For not seeing who you were. For being the kind of people who judge others based on their bank accounts. I'm sorry it took losing everything for me to understand what Dad was trying to teach us. Your father was a complicated man," I said. "He loved you more than anything, but he knew love without boundaries creates monsters. So he gave you boundaries. And he asked me to enforce them. Did you know?" she asked. "What he was planning? Why he married you?" I thought about how to answer that honestly. "No," I said. "I thought he loved me. Thought he wanted a companion for his last years. Thought maybe I'd gotten lucky after a lifetime of struggling. Reading his letter to you was the first time I understood I'd been cast in a role. That our entire relationship was designed to teach you something. Does that make you angry?" she asked. I considered it. Turned it over in my mind while I dried another plate. It did at first, I admitted. Felt like I'd been used. Like I was just a prop in someone else's story. But then I realized something. He chose me because of who I was. Because someone calculating and shallow wouldn't have stayed after the will reading. Wouldn't have taken you in when you showed up desperate. He saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself. And yeah, he used me. But he also gave me the resources to help people. To do work that matters. To live a life I never could have imagined. So maybe being used isn't the worst thing if it leads you to becoming who you're supposed to be. My stepson joined the conversation from the fridge. "Do you think we can become who we're supposed to be?" he asked. "After everything we've done? After how badly we've screwed up?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "But I think you're trying. And trying is the most important part." 7 months in, my stepdaughter asked if she could go back to school. Not Yale. She couldn't afford Yale without the full ride she'd lost when she dropped out. Somewhere local. Somewhere she could afford with a job and loans and the kind of struggle that makes you appreciate what you're working toward. I helped her research schools, state universities with solid programs, community colleges with transfer agreements. We sat at my kitchen table going through options, calculating costs, figuring out what was realistic. She got accepted to the state university with a partial scholarship based on her Yale transcript. She'd have to take out loans for the rest. She'd have to keep working to cover living expenses. She'd have to study while exhausted. It would take her 6 years instead of 4 to finish her degree, but it was possible. The day she got her acceptance letter, she hugged me. Really hugged me. Not the awkward, forced hugs from before Dad died. A real one. The kind that lasts long enough to mean something. "Thank you," she said. "For not giving up on us. For being what Dad knew we'd need. For being better than we deserved." "You're welcome," I said. "But understand something. This doesn't erase what happened. Doesn't make the past 3 years okay. You can't hug away years of cruelty. But it's a start. It's you becoming someone who understands what they did wrong and wants to do better." "I know," she said. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't know if I deserve that. I'm just grateful you're giving us a chance to become better people." My stepson took longer to figure out his path. He was still working through the shame and guilt, still seeing his therapist twice a week, still taking his medication, but he was stable, functioning, learning to forgive himself in small increments. About 8 months after I brought him home, he asked if we could talk. We sat on the couch that had become his bed. He was nervous, picking at his fingernails, not making eye contact. "I want to go back to school," he said, "but not Princeton. I can't go back there. Too many bad memories, too many people I owe apologies I don't know how to give. I was thinking maybe community college, something small, something where I can ease back into education without drowning." "That sounds smart," I said. He finally looked up at me. "I need to tell you something," he said. "About the gambling, about why I started, why I kept going even when I knew it was destroying everything." I waited, giving him space to find the words. "After Dad died, I was so angry," he said. "At him for leaving, at you for existing, at myself for being the kind of person who'd spend 3 years treating someone terribly, and calling it justified. I wanted to feel something other than anger. Gambling gave me that. When I was at the table, I didn't think about anything else. Didn't feel anything else. It was the only time I felt in control. But you weren't in control, I said gently. I know that now, he said. But for a while, it felt like I was. Felt like I was making something happen, building something, even though I was actually destroying everything. The therapist says it was self-sabotage, that I was proving to myself that I was as worthless as I felt, that I deserved to lose everything because I'd treated you so badly. Do you still feel that way? I asked. He thought about it. Really considered the question. Sometimes, he admitted, but less than before. And when I do feel that way, I can recognize it now, can see it for what it is instead of just drowning in it. That's progress, I guess. That's definite progress, I said. And yes, you can go back to school. Community college is a good choice. You can work part-time, study part-time, build back slowly. He nodded, then said something that surprised me. Can I ask you a question? About Dad. Of course, I said. Did he love you? He asked. Or were you really just part of his plan? Just a tool he used to teach us a lesson? I'd been asking myself that same question for 8 months, ever since reading his letter to my stepdaughter, trying to separate the man I'd married from the plan he'd been executing. I think he cared about me, I said slowly. Maybe not the romantic love you see in movies, but he respected me, valued what I brought to his life, trusted me to do what needed doing after he was gone. That's its own kind of love, different from what I thought I was getting, but not nothing. Does that hurt? He asked, knowing it wasn't what you thought. Yes, I admitted, but a lot of things hurt. That doesn't make them not worthwhile. Your father gave me resources I never would have had, gave me the chance to help people, gave me you two, even though it took 3 years and a disaster for you to become people I actually want in my life. That's something. Maybe not the fairy tale, but something real. We sat in silence for a while. Then he said, if I could go back and do it differently, I would. I'd be kind to you. I'd recognize what you were trying to do. I'd be the kind of person Dad hoped I'd become without needing to be destroyed first. But you can't go back, I said. None of us can. We can only move forward. And moving forward means becoming someone who learns from the past instead of being trapped by it. He enrolled in community college for the spring semester. Started with 2 classes, English and basic math, things he could handle while working and healing. He struggled at first. Hadn't studied in over a year. Had to relearn how to focus, how to care about something other than his own shame. But he kept at it. Did his homework at the kitchen table while my stepdaughter studied for her state university classes. They'd quiz each other sometimes, help each other with difficult concepts. They were becoming something they'd never been before. A team. Siblings who actually cared about each other instead of just tolerating each other out of biological obligation. A year after my stepdaughter had shown up at my door, we were sitting at dinner. I'd made lasagna. They'd helped, chopping vegetables and stirring sauce and setting the table. We'd developed routines, patterns of living together that felt natural instead of forced. My stepdaughter was talking about her psychology class, about learned behavior and generational trauma, about how people become who they become based on what they're taught and what they experience. She was animated, engaged with her education in a way she'd never been at Yale, because now she understood what it cost, understood the value of every class she sat through. My stepson was quieter, listening mostly, but he'd smile sometimes at something she said. Nod along. He was finding his way back to being human, to being someone who could engage with the world without drowning in shame. I realized in that moment that I was happy, not despite them, not in spite of the 3 years of hell they'd put me through, but with them, because they'd become real people, people who understood struggle, who valued things that mattered, who were learning to measure worth in character instead of dollars. After dinner, my stepdaughter helped me with dishes while my stepson took out the trash, small domestic routines that felt revolutionary compared to where we'd started. I've been thinking about something, she said while scrubbing a pan, about when I first came here, about what you said about paying the debt instead of giving me the money. I remembered that conversation, the distinction I'd made, the line I'd drawn. At the time, I was just grateful you were helping at all, she continued. But I've been thinking about why you did it that way. Why you wouldn't just give me the money and let me handle it. Why do you think I did it that way? I asked. Because if you'd given me the money, I wouldn't have learned anything, she said. I would have paid off the debt and felt like I'd fixed the problem, like I'd handled it myself, but I didn't fix it. You fixed it. And by making that clear, by making me understand that I was helpless without you, you made me face how far I'd fallen, how much I'd screwed up. If you'd just handed me the money, I'd still be the same person I was then, entitled, convinced I deserved things. But because you helped me in a way that made me face my own helplessness, I had to change. She looked at me with eyes that held real understanding. You were still teaching me, she said, just like Dad did, but you were kinder about it. Or maybe not kinder, maybe just more direct. I don't know, but I get it now. I get why you did it that way. Your father had a complicated plan, I said, but I'm not your father. I'm just someone trying to help you become people who don't destroy yourselves and others. Sometimes that means being direct. Sometimes that means being harsh. Always it means being honest. Do you think we're getting there? She asked. Becoming those people? I looked at her, really looked at her. At the girl who'd cropped me out of photos, who'd calculated the value of tolerating me, who was now washing dishes in my kitchen and asking real questions about who she wanted to become. Yes, I said. I think you're getting there. 18 months after my stepdaughter first knocked on my door, she asked if she could bring someone to dinner. A boy from her psychology class. Someone she'd been studying with. Maybe more than studying with based on the way she blushed when she mentioned him. Of course, I said. His name was Timothy. He was a transfer student like her, working his way through school, first person in his family to go to college. He showed up with flowers and good manners, and the kind of nervousness that comes from wanting to make a good impression. My stepdaughter had told him everything. About her past. About how she'd treated me. About the path that had led her to state university and minimum wage jobs and therapy twice a week. He knew all of it, and had decided she was worth it anyway. Over dinner, I watched them interact. The way he listened when she talked. The way she deferred to him on some things, but held her ground on others. They were equals. Partners. Nothing like the relationship she'd probably have had with some Ivy League boy who measured worth in pedigree and trust funds. After he left, she helped me clean up. She was glowing, happy in a way I'd never seen her. He's the first person I've dated who knows the real me, she said. Who knows what I did, who I was. And he likes me anyway. Not because of my last name or my father's money or where I went to school, just because of who I am now. That's how it should be, I said. I know, she said, but I didn't know that before. Before, I thought people's value came from external things. Pedigree, wealth, status. I dated boys from the right families, boys who looked good in photos, boys who would have been good for my image. But I didn't actually like any of them, didn't enjoy spending time with them. I just thought that's what relationships were supposed to be. She paused, drying a plate carefully. Timothy isn't from the right family. He doesn't have money or status. His dad drives a truck. His mom cleans houses. But he's the kindest person I've ever met. And he makes me want to be better. Not better in some social climbing way. Better as in more honest, more genuine, more human. I'm glad you found him, I said. And I'm glad you've become someone who can recognize what matters. 2 years after that first desperate knock on my door, my stepson graduated from community college. Associate's degree in business. Solid grades. Good attendance. He'd worked hard for it. Studied while exhausted. Pushed through when he wanted to quit. At the graduation ceremony, he walked across the stage to accept his diploma. The crowd was small. Community college graduations don't draw big audiences. But my stepdaughter and I were there. And Timothy. And a few friends my stepson had made. People who'd studied with him, worked alongside him, helped him become someone new. After the ceremony, we went to dinner at a modest restaurant. Nothing fancy. Just good food and good company. My stepson seemed lighter somehow. Like he'd been carrying something heavy and had finally set it down. Thank you, he said to me over dessert. For everything. For not giving up on me when I'd given up on myself. For paying off the debt even though I didn't deserve it. For making me work minimum wage jobs instead of just handing me money. For making me go to therapy even when I fought it. For teaching me what Dad tried to teach me and I was too stupid to learn. You weren't stupid, I said. You were young and entitled and suffering from a lifetime of being told you were special because of who your parents were instead of who you were. That's not stupidity. That's just being human in the wrong environment. I want to transfer to a 4-year school, he said. Keep studying. Maybe get a bachelor's degree. Maybe even a master's eventually. But I want to do it right this time. With loans and work and actual effort. No shortcuts, no trust funds. Just the hard way. The hard way is usually the right way, I said. My stepdaughter nodded. She understood that truth now too. They both did. 3 years after that desperate morning, my stepdaughter graduated from State University. Bachelor's degree in psychology. Honors. She'd worked for it. Studied while working 20 hours a week at the coffee shop. Took out loans she'd be paying back for years. Did everything the hard way. The right way. Her graduation was bigger than my stepson's had been. More people in the audience. She'd made real friends. Connected with professors. Built a life that was hers instead of just an extension of her father's name and money. Timothy was there with a ring in his pocket. He'd asked my permission the week before. Old-fashioned, but I appreciated it. Not because he needed my approval, but because he wanted to honor the role I'd played in my stepdaughter's life. I said yes, of course. He was exactly the kind of person I'd hoped she'd find. Someone who valued her for who she was. Who'd stood by her through therapy and growth and the hard work of becoming someone new. He proposed after the ceremony, in front of everyone. Got down on one knee and told her she was the strongest person he'd ever met. That watching her rebuild her life from nothing had taught him what courage looked like. That he wanted to spend the rest of his life being someone worthy of her strength. She cried when she said yes. Happy tears. The kind that come from finally being seen for who you actually are instead of who people expect you to be. The wedding was small, intimate, just family and close friends. Nothing like the society wedding she probably would have had if her father had lived and she'd stayed the person she'd been. This was better. Real. Full of people who actually cared instead of people who showed up because it was expected. My stepson was the one who walked her down the aisle. Their relationship had healed over the years. They'd both grown up. Both learned what mattered. Both became people who valued each other for reasons that had nothing to do with obligation or biology. I sat in the front row watching, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. The 3 years of hell, the desperate knock on my door, the slow, painful process of growth, The therapy and minimum wage jobs and hard conversations, all of it had led here. To this moment where my stepdaughter was marrying someone who saw her clearly and loved her anyway. At the reception, she gave a speech, thanked everyone for coming, thanked Timothy for seeing her potential when she couldn't see it herself. Then she turned to me. "There's someone here I need to thank specifically," she said. "Someone who saved my life in more ways than one, who taught me what real strength looks like, who showed me that love isn't about transactions or calculations, it's about showing up. Even when showing up is hard, even when showing up costs you something, even when the person you're showing up for has given you every reason to walk away." She paused, tears in her eyes. "I treated this person terribly," she continued. "For 3 years I was cruel in ways I'm still ashamed of. And when I finally realized I'd been wrong, when I showed up desperate and broken at her door, she could have turned me away, should have turned me away, but she didn't. She saved me, and my brother, and she taught us what it means to be human in a world that often rewards being inhuman." She looked directly at me. "Thank you," she said, "for being better than I deserved, for being what Dad knew I'd need, for being family when I didn't know what family meant. I love you, and I'm sorry it took me so long to figure out how to say that." The room applauded. I cried. Not sad tears, not angry tears, just the tears that come from watching something broken become something beautiful. After the wedding, life continued. My stepson finished his bachelor's degree, started working at a nonprofit similar to mine, helping people navigate financial systems designed to trap them. He was good at it, had the kind of understanding that only comes from having been trapped yourself. My stepdaughter started graduate school, getting her master's in counseling psychology. She wanted to work with young adults, help them before they self-destructed the way she and her brother almost had. She understood the psychology of entitlement, of feeling lost, of making terrible choices because you don't know how to make good ones. They both still came to dinner every Sunday, brought their partners, talked about their weeks, their struggles, their victories. We'd become something real, a family built not on obligation, but on choice, on having survived something together and come out better on the other side. 4 years after that first desperate knock, my stepson got married too, to a woman who worked in education, who'd grown up poor and worked her way through college, who understood what it meant to struggle. They were perfectly matched, both of them people who'd learned the hard way what mattered. At his wedding, he also gave a speech, also thanked me, also acknowledged the journey that had led him there. He talked about rock bottom, about thinking he'd destroyed his life beyond repair, about someone showing him that rock bottom wasn't the end, just the beginning of building something new. 5 years after that first knock, my stepdaughter had her first baby, a girl. They named her after her grandmother, not the grandmother who'd died young, the one who'd taught her what love actually looked like. They named her after me. I cried when they told me, held that tiny baby and understood why my husband had done what he did, why he'd orchestrated everything, why he'd married me and made his kids hate me and left me everything. It was all for this. For the moment when his children became people who understood what mattered, who raised children differently than they'd been raised, who measured worth in character instead of dollars. Holding my granddaughter, I finally forgave him, for using me, for not loving me the way I'd thought he did, for making 3 years of my life miserable in service of a plan I hadn't understood, because that plan had worked. Had taken 2 entitled, cruel children and transformed them into people who understood compassion, who worked hard, who valued what mattered, who became exactly who he'd hoped they'd become. And it had transformed me too, into someone who understood her own strength, who knew what she was capable of, who learned that love isn't about romance or fairy tales. It's about showing up, even when showing up is hard, especially when showing up is hard. 6 years after that first knock, both my stepchildren had successful careers, happy marriages, growing families. They owned modest homes they'd worked to afford, drove practical cars, lived within their means. They donated to charities, volunteered in their communities, raised their children to understand the value of work and compassion, and treating people with dignity regardless of their bank accounts. They became everything their father had hoped they'd become, everything I'd hoped they'd become. Not perfect, still flawed, still working through things in therapy, but good, fundamentally good in a way they hadn't been before. We still had Sunday dinners, now with grandchildren running around, making noise and mess and joy. My small condo was too small for everyone, so we rotated houses. But we always made time, always showed up, because that's what family does. One Sunday after dinner at my stepdaughter's house, she and I were cleaning up while everyone else played with the kids in the living room. She was washing dishes, I was drying, the same routine we'd had for years. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked suddenly, taking us in, helping us. "You could have said no, could have lived your life without all this complication, without being dragged into our mess." I thought about it, really considered the question. "No," I said, "I don't regret it. It was hard. Sometimes it was terrible, but it was also real. And it led to this, to Sunday dinners and grandchildren and watching you both become people I'm proud to know. That's worth the hard parts." She set down the dish she was washing, turned to look at me. "I need you to know something," she said. "About Dad, about his plan, about all of it." I waited. "I was angry at him for a long time," she continued, "for manipulating us, for using you, for orchestrating everything instead of just being honest. But I understand now. We wouldn't have listened if he'd been honest. We would have kept being who we were, kept measuring worth in dollars, kept treating people like transactions. He knew the only way to teach us was to let us fail, to let us hit bottom, to let us discover on our own what really mattered. She paused, tears in her eyes. And he knew we'd need you when we failed. Knew you'd be there. Knew you were strong enough to save us even when we didn't deserve saving. He chose perfectly. You were exactly what we needed. Even though it cost you. Even though it hurt you. You were exactly right. I hugged her. This woman who'd once cropped me out of photos. Who'd made 3 years of my life miserable. Who'd become one of the most important people in my world. Your father was complicated, I said. But he loved you. And he trusted me. That's something. We stood there in her kitchen, surrounded by the sounds of family, of children laughing, of life continuing, of something broken that had been made whole. And I realized that this was enough. More than enough. This was everything. My stepkids had made it clear they didn't love me and only tolerated me for the lifestyle. So I took the lifestyle away, and tolerance vanished. But in its place, slowly and painfully, something real grew. Something that couldn't be bought or calculated or measured in dollars. Something that only exists when people choose each other despite having every reason not to. That's what love actually is. Not the fairy tale. Not the romance. Just showing up, day after day, year after year, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. And in the end, that was worth everything.